Next topic is speak in terms of responsibilities, not rights. This is one of the big things in the spirit of independence. I'm not saying that positively. Is that people, that's my right. I got a right. Everybody wants rights. They just don't want responsibilities. That's problematic. You know, my 6-year-old doesn't have many rights because she doesn't have many responsibilities. It's very, very simple. Brush your teeth, pick your shoes up, put your clothes in a hanger, you know, and she has not many rights. She gets lots of benefits because she's young she's not making a living. She's not going to make a living in our household for 18 or 21 years. We're not going to ask her, probably, to contribute financially to the upkeep of the family, even though she's bleeding us dry with cost. I'm saying that tongue-in-cheek, right? But as she gains rights, she gains responsibilities. People with tremendous responsibility have lost all their rights. They've lost all their rights. The president, somebody sets his schedule, and every moment of every day it's tracked out. I remember seeing a pro football team's preseason schedule, and this was 20 years ago. But in this particular coach, and I'd consider he wasn't abnormal, every moment, every minute was on that schedule 24 hours a day through the whole preseason. When they were in training camp, whether it was 4 or 6 weeks, wherever they were, this happened to be in California, every minute was there. Now, some of the minutes, it might say, you know, from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., it was just, you know, sleep. But the point, it was accounted for on the sheet of paper. That these players, when they were under the authority of a pro football team, the time was not theirs anymore. As they had increased responsibility, they lost their rights, right? And so it's important to understand that. My daughter has very little responsibility, right? Very little responsibility. But as her responsibility increases, she loses the rights to a bunch of things. And they travel together. There has to be an understanding about that. And so we talk in terms of responsibilities, not rights. You're responsible to serve. You're responsible to love. You're responsible to give. You're responsible to clean up stuff you didn't make, to clean up messes you didn't make. You're responsible to leave things better when you leave than when you came. That's not fair because somebody messed up the room and now we go into it, and when we leave, we got to make sure it's cleaner than it was before. Some people say leave it as you found it, and we would say no. We go deeper than that. We're going to leave it better than we found it. We're going to leave things better because we were there. When we touch stuff, it's better. This is the kind of core belief. This is where we come from. This is our thinking. We want to teach people to touch stuff and make it better because they touched it. Philosophically, we want players to become better people, better players, whatever better means. I think you understand the principle we're talking about here. And so, when you choose to become part of a team, you forfeit your rights and gain responsibilities. That was that wooden line about when you choose to become part of a team, you cease to exist. It was an exaggerated statement to bring a principle to play, that it's no longer about you, it's about the team. In war, somebody's going to be the point man, and the point man gets shot first and more often than the guy in the back. The guys that are charging the fort have a risk associated with that different than the guys in the supply line who never see the actual battle, per se. They're all part of the military. They all have a job. That's where we've come up with that terminology. You do your job. God will do his job. Don't mix up the jobs. Players play, coaches coach, fans cheer. Fans don't coach, fans don't play. Coaches aren't fans, coaches don't play, players don't coach. Players do need to be fans of each other, right? So know your role and do your role, 2x4, according to the Word of God, by the power of God, for the glory of God. Speak in terms of responsibilities, not rights, because what you're going to get all the time is people saying this. Do you ever hear this with your children? That's not fair. That's not fair. Life is not fair. It's not fair in terms of what you see. Some people are going to live and some people are going to die. Hebrews 11 is a picture of the kingdom. When you sign over your rights to God, you take on responsibilities. You give up your rights. You sign your death warrant to gain responsibilities, to live and to serve and to die for others and for the sake of the kingdom. This is understandable. Frankly, it's unfortunately not. But this should be understood in Christianity, that once you're born again by your will in response to God's invitation, you lay down your life, you lay down your rights, and you gain responsibilities. It's all part of this, not my will, but yours be done. It doesn't, you're not saying you don't have a will. You're just saying, I want your will over my will. It's not denying that we have a will. We're humans. We have desires, we have wants, etc. What we're saying is, I lay those down again and again. I put to death daily, Bible verse. Daily put to death myself, my life, my agenda, my wishes, my dreams. If the Lord chooses to resurrect them, he can. When the king asked for life, when God said you're going to die, Hezekiah, and he begged God for more time, God said, okay, I'll give you 15 years. You can make requests. He's asking you to. Part of our doctrine of prayer, of tacos, if you know what that is, thanksgiving, adoration, confession, praying for others, praying for self, which is intercession and supplication. This is all part about asking him. He's asking us to ask. But he's asking us also to say, not my will, but yours be done. That's what sanctifies your prayer. That's what sanctifies your requests, is that you submit the request to God, and then you confess in the front end that you submit to what his response is to your request. If my kids say to me, I don't want to ask because you always say no. I don't always say no. I may mostly say no, but I don't always say no. That's not true. With my teams, what I said to them is, I want to know what you're thinking. I'm not saying I'm going to do what you ask. I'm not saying I'm going to do what you recommend. I'm saying I will listen to you, and then I'll make a decision of what I think is best for the team. What's best for the team may not be best for you in terms of your will and your wishes. But this is about the team. It's not about you. It's about us. It's not about me. It's about the team. And my job as leader is to serve you by leading to do what I discern to be as best for the team, as best I can tell, for the sake of God's glory, according to his word, by his power, for his glory, 2 by 4. This is how the order works in that regard. So, speak in terms of responsibilities. Players are always going to say that's not fair. You know, they're going to feel like because they're comparing themselves to each other. They're comparing themselves to stuff. Don't. Do what Jesus said to Peter and John, last book of John. I'm talking to you. Don't compare yourself to John. Don't wonder what's going to happen to John. This is your calling. This is your life. Paul, this is your destiny. And Ananias, tell him what he's in for, okay? I'll give him sufficient power. My grace is sufficient. He will be weak, and I will be strong. And this is the board game we're in. This is the board game we're in. We're in a board game. That's my sport terminology, life. That he sets the rules. He sets the boundary. He sets the principles. He sets it up. He provides the power. He provides the instruction. He provides everything you're going to need for life and godliness. And he asks for obedience. He commands obedience. But we have then the right and responsibility to choose to obey or not. We still can exercise our will. He gives us that right to exercise our will. Exercise our will to choose to obey him, to choose to submit to him, and to choose to embrace the responsibilities that are part of being a man or a woman of God. The next one is promote attitudes, not rules. That doesn't mean you don't have rules, but in our thinking, we want heart changes. We don't want behavior modification. Now, at the end of the day, sometimes we're going to ask for behavior, even if the heart's not into it or not. But Frosty was a genius at this. He realized that I want to create a climate of want-tos instead of have-tos. Now, there's certain things they're going to have to do. But he erred, E-R-R-O-R-E-D, he erred on taking the risk that players would not choose right. But he wanted them always to feel the responsibility of self-determination, of making a choice. I sometimes had a problem that I felt like he should make people do certain things when he would let them choose not to do it, because he was so committed to give people the chance to make it a want to instead of a have to. He wanted as little as possible to create a climate where players had to do stuff. He wanted them to want to do stuff because he realized in terms of lifestyle and sustainability, if they did stuff only because they had to, as soon as he wasn't there, they wouldn't do it because it wasn't who they were. They did it because he said so. Now, there's a place for duty. There's a place for duty. But if it's all duty and not done out of love, then that's not going to be sustainable. And what he was hoping for is out of respect to him and out of requests of him, that they would honor him by choosing to obey what they knew he wanted without him making to do it. I remember a conversation his son Scott and I had with him one late night at a pizza place where we wanted some guys that were doing their own thing. That's all our terminology. They weren't doing our thing, they were doing their own thing. And they were making their own decisions about things that Frosty asked and requested. He didn't make him do it. He had the right to make him do it, but he didn't because he wanted to create a culture where they would choose right voluntarily, even though the risk then applies that it's the God thing. God has given man a will. We're not going to get into the doctrinal positions of Calvinism and Arminianism, but at some point we have responsibility, and we have been given a chance, an opportunity to exercise our will at some level, as mysterious as that might seem, under a sovereign God. And we're not going to get into those doctrinal positions. But he takes a risk, so to speak, humanly speaking, that we might reject him, that we might thumb our nose at him, that we might give him the finger, whatever terminology you want to use. He took that chance. And we would understand from the scriptures that many will take that chance to reject his free offer of pardon for sin. That's a risk he takes. And Frosty, more than I feel comfortable, because I was a head coach too, gave his players the option or the right to disagree with him on things that I thought was not in the best interest of the program. But it wasn't my team. And so I can have an opinion, but I have to submit my opinion. And so when myself and Scott, his son, approached him about some players that we felt needed to be let go or needed to be talked to about, here's the options, and if you choose this, this will happen. If you choose this, this will happen. You know, I always said this, Frosty never kicked anybody off the team. They kicked themselves off. And I embraced that also. I let people go if they wanted to. I never made them go. I gave them the opportunity. They still would be disciplined. I might say something like this. I might say, listen, sounds like you're really more about you than about us. And for the record, you need us more than we need you. I know you're a great player and yada, 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 but we don't need your talent. We want your heart. And if you don't want to be here, if this doesn't matter enough, if you feel like it's not worth dying to yourself for the sake of the team, I understand it. Why don't you take a week away and just think about it? And if you don't miss us, then clearly it'd be best for you to be here. But if you find that maybe you'd like to be a part of it, we'd like you to be here. But only if you follow these, whatever they are, commandments, principles, whatever. Whatever it is that we were asking, we weren't asking, we were telling. We were saying, this is behavior modification, and we're asking you to fall in line, and we're asking you as best possible to give your heart to it, to have a right heart about this. But if you don't, we understand, let's shake hands, agree to disagree, and go our separate ways. But you don't get the right to play because this is a privilege. This isn't a right. That's what we'd say to them. Regardless of their ability, of course, then when the team realized that to a good player, a great player, we were willing to say, we don't need you, you're welcome to not be here, that made them realize, oh, they are committed to this philosophy. They aren't just trying to win. They're willing to let go a talented, productive player because he isn't on the same page of our heart. We want him to have our heart. We want him to want to have our heart. He may not be there yet, but we want them to want to have our heart. Just like with God, we want people to want to obey. I don't always obey. I want to obey. It agrees with me when I don't obey, but I want to obey. And I ask God to help me want to obey more. That's the heart he's looking for. What he doesn't want is somebody to say, I'll do what I want to do, when I want to do it, the way I want to do it. That would be a wrong heart. And Frosty and our philosophy is about coaching the heart and loving the heart. There are going to be times where we mandate behavior modification, even if the heart isn't there. But we're going to err on creating a culture where people choose to willingly give their heart to the greater good, to the program, to the vision, to the mission of the organization. They may not be there yet, but they got to want to be there. If they don't want to be there at all, then it's not going to work. It's not going to work. They let themselves go in that scenario, in my thinking. That isn't necessarily a shared belief in our network. It's not a mandatory belief in the philosophy. It's just my personal conviction. What I'm saying to you is that Frosty allowed people to go against his preferences because he wanted to create a culture of want to over have to, and he erred on taking the risk that some guys would be in the program, allowed to continue to exist in the program, in disobedience to his wishes on issues that he did not consider critical. There were some things that there wasn't an option. There were other things he let be an option that I didn't feel comfortable with him letting me in an option, but it wasn't my team. And so I had to say, not my will, but yours be done, coach, because you're going to allow these guys to keep being on the team that I think are cancerous to our vision and mission. But when I got to be a head coach, then I had an opportunity to do what I sensed about that issue. And my assistant coaches didn't always agree with me, which I understood. And I said, I know that you got a different vision and a different sense. And that's good, because that's God putting in you what he wants for you. But for right now, I'm here and I'm responsible, and I'm the one who's got the right and the responsibility of decision making. And so with players, they're learning that. They're learning to say, not my will, but yours be done. Through sport, they're learning to defer their wishes and defer their agenda and defer their preferences for the good of the team. Or because the coach said so. And again, duty is a hard thing to be sustainable if people don't want to do it, but they do it because they have to. But at some point, duty is part of it. What you want, though, is them to do it more driven by love. You want them to be compelled by love. There's times I obey God that I don't feel like it. I don't even want to, but I know I have to, and so I do. I don't have to, but my conscience and obedience draws me to do it, even though it's not what I feel, not what I think, not what I prefer, not what I even think is best. What I think is best for the kingdom and what he thinks is best for the kingdom are two different things. I have to come to grips with that. You learn that through sport. You learn that through sport, or you can at least. And we have a vision for that because of the second thing, or the next thing, which is, I'm sorry, I got to finish thought on this. We're looking for changed hearts, not blind obedience. But there are going to be times when blind obedience is required. I just want you to understand this about the heart. And the last thing in this regard, two things, is win your players' hearts and they'll follow you wherever you lead. I found this to be true. When a player believed that we wanted their best and we were committed to them, and they saw us put to death our preferences for them, when they saw us stay after practice for them, when they saw us get involved in their life in a personal issue, when they had a need, when they saw us make time in our busy schedule because they needed to talk about something, it compelled them to want to please us and obey us. That's a good thing. So as you actually biblically lead, people will be compelled to follow because they're aware of the sacrifices you make for their sake that are unselfish on your part, and it motivates them to be unselfish themselves. And when you win their heart by serving them to your loss for their benefit, they will follow you. I've found that you can be incredibly firm with people in the sport context. Incredibly firm with them. And very demanding without being hard or unlovely. And those players will follow you. They'll go where they don't even understand where you're taking them, and it hurts them physically or emotionally or mentally if you say, trust me in this. This is a big deal. They'll do that because they saw how you died. This is true of the Father. I follow Jesus, though it doesn't make sense sometimes or a lot, though it's hurtful to me and I don't understand it at all, and I think there's a better way, because his track record is he died for me. He sent his son and died for me when I didn't even care about him. And that compels me and inclines me to be more willing to trust him when things don't make sense, aren't going my way, and are completely uncomfortable. That is learned in the context of sport by a coach or a leader who serves his players or the managers or the trainers or the whatever to his own loss and says literally or attitudinally, I don't see that, I don't feel good about that, nevertheless, not my will but yours be done. That's how they learn that principle.